The town of Fairview looked beautiful from a distance. White-painted fences, red brick houses, and freshly cut lawns stretched across most neighborhoods. But on the far side, where the streets cracked and weeds grew through the sidewalks, life told a different story. This was where Aaliyah Carter lived, a 16-year-old black girl with dark skin, kind brown eyes, and worn-out sneakers that carried her across those broken streets every day. Her family's small, faded house leaned tiredly to one side, its porch steps creaking with each step.
Most mornings, Aaliyah left home early with a backpack that wasn't just full of books. It carried responsibility. She wasn't just a student. She was the caretaker for her younger brother, the helper for her exhausted mother who worked 2 cleaning jobs, and the quiet dreamer who believed life could somehow get better. But in Fairview, dreams didn't come easily for poor black kids. They were judged before they even had a chance to prove themselves.
One chilly autumn afternoon, Aaliyah was walking home from school, her backpack straps digging into her shoulders. Her sneakers scraped against the pavement when she noticed an old man struggling with a cane near the edge of the street. Cars honked impatiently as the man tried to cross. His white hair gleamed under the sun, his back bent with age, his plaid shirt too thin for the breeze. People passed by, annoyed, no one stopping to help.
Aaliyah paused. She looked around. Grown men, women with grocery bags, drivers leaning out windows, all ignoring him. She didn't think twice. Dropping her bag on the grass, she jogged toward him. "Here, sir," she said softly, looping her arm through his frail one. Slowly, carefully, she guided him across the road while drivers rolled their eyes and muttered, but she didn't care. When they reached the sidewalk, the old man exhaled in relief, gripping her arm gently. His eyes, a pale blue, studied her face with quiet gratitude. He didn't speak, just gave her a nod before shuffling away. Aaliyah picked up her bag and kept walking home, unaware that moment would change everything in her life.
From a porch across the street, Mrs. Helen Whittemore, a wealthy white woman in her late 50s, watched the whole scene unfold. She was known for her sharp tongue and sharper judgments. Her manicured hands clutched a glass of sweet tea as her lips twisted into a frown. "That Carter girl again," she muttered. "Always trying to look good in front of folks. She'll never amount to anything." In Fairview, Mrs. Whittemore's words carried weight. She was part of the old families, people who thought they owned the town's reputation. And she made sure everyone knew how she felt about the black families who lived on the poor side. As Aaliyah disappeared down the block, Mrs. Whittemore was already dialing a neighbor, her voice dripping with disdain. Within hours, whispers began to spread.
By the next morning, Aaliyah felt the shift. At school, kids snickered behind her back. One white classmate muttered loud enough for her to hear, "Hey, charity case, saving old men now? You want a medal?" At the cafeteria, she sat alone. Whispers followed her, fueled by Mrs. Whittemore's gossip. They twisted the story, making it sound like Aaliyah had staged the whole thing just to get attention. Her chest ached as she pushed food around her tray. She wanted to shout the truth, but she knew it wouldn't matter. In Fairview, her skin color and her family's poverty spoke louder than her actions ever could. That night, at home, she stayed quiet during dinner. Her mother noticed, but didn't press. She was too exhausted, her hands raw from scrubbing floors all day. Aaliyah just smiled weakly and helped her little brother with homework, hiding her hurt deep inside.
Days passed. The incident with the old man faded for most people, but the sting of whispers stayed with Aaliyah. She didn't know the man's name, didn't know who he was, just that he had needed help and she had given it. Then one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the cracked streets gold, a shiny black truck rolled slowly down her block. It was polished, out of place among the beat-up cars and rusted bicycles. Aaliyah looked up from the porch where she was sketching in her notebook. The truck stopped in front of her house. The door opened.
Out stepped the same old man she had helped. But this time he wasn't struggling. His posture was straighter, his clothes crisp, his presence commanding. He carried himself with quiet authority, as if he didn't just live in Fairview, but owned it. Neighbors peeked from their windows. Curtains shifted. Even Mrs. Whitmore leaned forward on her porch, her jaw tightening. The man walked toward Aaliyah's house, his cane tapping lightly against the pavement. He stopped at the gate, his pale blue eyes locking on to Aaliyah's. She froze, notebook slipping from her hands. And that's when the whispers started again, only this time they weren't mocking. They were filled with shock, because everyone in Fairview recognized him now. Henry Lawson, the richest farmer in the country, the man who owned half the land around the town, a man no one expected to see on this side of the tracks.
The Carter house was small, its paint peeling and roof patched with tin sheets, but it held warmth inside. On that evening, as the autumn sun faded, Aaliyah stood frozen by the gate as Henry Lawson, the wealthiest man in Fairview, approached. Her mother, Denise Carter, opened the door with tired eyes, still in her faded work uniform. When she saw the tall old man at her gate, she gasped. Everyone in town knew Henry Lawson. His face was in the newspaper. His land stretched for miles. But what was he doing here? Henry tipped his hat politely and spoke in a steady, gravelly voice. "Evening, ma'am. I came to thank your daughter. She helped me when nobody else would." Denise blinked in disbelief, her gaze shifting between Henry and Aaliyah. She stammered a quiet, "Please come in."
Inside, the living room was modest. A worn couch, a flickering lamp, family photos hanging on crooked nails. Henry lowered himself slowly into the chair Denise offered, his cane resting against the arm. His eyes softened as he looked at Aaliyah. "Young lady," he said, "you didn't just help an old man cross the street. You reminded me that decency still exists." Aaliyah's cheeks flushed. She ducked her head, unsure what to say. Henry cleared his throat. "I've been blessed with more than I need. Land, crops, wealth. But wealth doesn't mean a thing if I can't put it to good use." Denise's brows furrowed as Henry continued. "I want to help your daughter. I'll cover her school fees, her books, her college fund. Whatever she dreams of, she should have the chance to reach it. And it won't stop there. I'll make sure this home is repaired so you and your children can live with dignity." Silence filled the small living room. Denise pressed her hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. For years she had scraped by, never knowing how she would make rent, how she would feed her kids, and now the richest man in town was offering them a lifeline. Aaliyah felt her heart race. Part of her was overjoyed. This was the kind of miracle she had only imagined in daydreams. But another part trembled with fear, because in Fairview nothing came without whispers, and whispers had already begun.
By the next morning, the town was buzzing. At the diner, whispers floated between coffee cups. At the grocery store, heads leaned closer over carts. Henry Lawson went to the Carter house? Why her? She's just some poor black girl. Doesn't he know what kind of family they are? Mrs. Whitmore was the loudest of them all. Sitting in her spotless kitchen, she gathered her circle of friends and fanned the flames. "It's disgraceful," she hissed. "All the hard-working white kids in this town, and he chooses her? He's lost his mind."
By afternoon, Aaliyah felt the weight of it. At school, kids who had once ignored her now sneered openly. Some mocked her, saying she was the farmer's pet. Others whispered cruel jokes about her family being charity cases. Every step she took down the hallway felt heavier, like the whole town had turned against her. That evening, as Aaliyah sat quietly on the porch, Henry returned. This time, he didn't come with promises. He came with a story. He sat beside her, the wooden steps creaking under his weight. His voice was softer now, almost fragile. "You know, child," he began, "when I was your age, I wasn't rich. I was just another poor farm boy. And back then, there were folks who said I didn't belong either. Not because of money, because I worked alongside black farmers, because I treated them like equals. My own kind turned their backs on me for it." Aaliyah turned to him, eyes wide. Henry nodded slowly. "I built my fortune with the help of people who were cast aside, men who worked harder than anyone, but were paid less just because of their skin. I never forgot that. And when I saw you, helping me without hesitation, it reminded me of what real strength looks like. That's why I'm standing by you, no matter what this town says." A lump formed in Aaliyah's throat. For the first time since the gossip began, she felt hope again.
But hope didn't stop the storm. Within a week, the backlash turned uglier. Posters appeared at school, mocking Aaliyah with cruel drawings. Someone spray-painted, "Stay in your place," on the wall near her house. Denise came home one night with tear-streaked cheeks after a woman at her cleaning job told her she was teaching her kids to beg. Even Aaliyah's little brother, James, was cornered by bullies who taunted, "Your sister's just a charity case. Nobody respects your family." The cruelty cut deep. And still, Henry stood firm. He visited often, checking on the Carters, refusing to be intimidated. But each visit seemed to fuel more gossip, more resentment. It all boiled to a head when the town council called for a meeting. Officially, it was about community funding and education. Unofficially, everyone knew it was about Henry Lawson and his decision to uplift Aaliyah Carter.
The night of the meeting, the town hall buzzed with energy. People packed the wooden benches, their voices rising in heated whispers. On one side sat Mrs. Whitmore and her circle, faces twisted with disdain. On the other sat the few neighbors who quietly supported Aaliyah, but were too afraid to speak against the crowd. Henry entered last, his cane tapping on the floor. Aaliyah followed close behind with her mother, their presence drawing every eye in the room. The air was thick, suffocating. Everyone was waiting for Henry to speak.
The town hall creaked under the weight of bodies. Wooden fans spun lazily overhead, stirring the air, but not cooling the heat of resentment simmering inside. People leaned forward on the benches, their faces eager, tense, waiting for the drama to unfold. At the front of the room sat the council. Old white men in stiff suits who claimed neutrality but had already chosen their side. Their gazes slid past Aaliyah and her mother as though they were invisible. Mrs. Whitmore sat near the aisle in a pressed floral dress, her lips curled in a satisfied smirk. This was her moment, the stage where she would shame Henry Lawson publicly for betraying his community. Around her, nods of agreement rippled like waves. Aaliyah sat between her mother and Henry, her heart pounding so loud she thought the whole room could hear it.
The meeting began with small talk, road repairs, taxes, but everyone knew it was leading somewhere darker. Finally, Councilman Harris cleared his throat and said the words everyone had been waiting for. "Mr. Lawson, there's concern about your recent activities, supporting a certain family in ways that seem, well, unusual." The room erupted in whispers. Mrs. Whitmore stood, her voice sharp and righteous. "This is about fairness," she declared. "For years, we've had white children in this town, hard-working, respectful, who could use scholarships, who deserve opportunity. But instead, Mr. Lawson chooses to pour money into one girl's future. A girl from a family that has never contributed to this community. Is that right? Is that fair?" A chorus of agreement rose. Heads nodded. Voices muttered, "She's right." Aaliyah's stomach sank. Her eyes burned, but she kept her chin lifted.
Henry Lawson didn't rush to answer. He leaned heavily on his cane, pushing himself up with a grunt. The room fell silent, every eye on him. He scanned the crowd slowly, letting the silence stretch until the whispers died. His voice, when it came, was steady, gravelly, commanding.
You say fairness? Let me tell you what fairness looks like." He pointed toward Aaliyah, her small frame dwarfed by the bench. "That girl helped me when I was stumbling, when I was nothing more than an old man in need. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask who I was. She saw a human being who needed kindness. That's fairness. Treating someone like they matter no matter what they look like." Gasps echoed. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but Henry wasn't done.
Henry's eyes locked on Mrs. Whitmore. His voice sharpened. "And you, Margaret Whitmore, sit there talking about community. Tell me, where was your son last month when he wrecked his daddy's truck drunk? Who paid to hush it up? I did, quietly. Not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want this town shamed." Mrs. Whitmore's face flushed crimson. She sputtered, but Henry pressed on. "Where were your hard-working white children when I needed help crossing that street? They laughed. They stared. Not one lifted a hand. But Aaliyah Carter did. Poor? Yes. Black? Yes. But with more decency than half the folks in this room combined." A heavy silence dropped, broken only by the squeak of the fan above.
For a moment, the room was stunned. Aaliyah felt heat rise in her chest. She stood, her legs trembling but her voice clear. "I never asked for any of this," she said softly, but every word carried. "I just helped someone who needed me, and now people treat me like I've done something wrong, like being poor is a crime, like being black is a crime." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't break. "If kindness is wrong, then maybe this whole town has forgotten what's right." The words hung heavy, slicing through the smug whispers.
A murmur rose from the back of the room. It wasn't agreement, it was applause, slow, hesitant, but growing. A few younger folks, college students home for break, clapped first. Then a black family near the door. Then more hands joined, the sound building until it filled the hall. Henry straightened, pride glimmering in his tired eyes. The tide was shifting. Mrs. Whitmore sank back into her seat, her smirk gone, her face pale with humiliation. The council shifted uncomfortably, sensing the crowd slipping from their control.
Henry raised a hand, silencing the applause. "Let me make one thing clear," he said. "My money is mine, and I'll spend it where I see fit. Aaliyah Carter has earned my respect, my support, and my promise. If that bothers you, too bad. I've got enough land, enough wealth, and enough years behind me to know one thing. This town either changes or it rots." He leaned on his cane, his voice trembling but fierce. "And I won't be here to watch it rot." The room erupted again, but this time the sound wasn't anger. It was a mix of shame and reluctant admiration. For once, the whispering crowd had nothing left to say.
In the days that followed, gossip still lingered, but it had lost its venom. The video of the meeting, secretly recorded on a phone, spread across social media. Within weeks, the story reached beyond Fairview. News outlets carried headlines.
Black teen's simple act of kindness exposes racism in small town. Wealthiest farmer stands by her. Aaliyah, once mocked, now walked through school halls with her head higher. Some students avoided her, ashamed of what they'd said. Others quietly whispered apologies. Malik bragged proudly to his friends, "That's my sister." Henry made good on his promise. The Carter house was repaired, new paint gleaming in the sun. Aaliyah received a scholarship fund in her name, one that would carry her through college and beyond.
Months later, at a community event, Aaliyah stood at a podium, addressing a crowd. She wore a simple dress, her curls framing her face, her voice steady. "I didn't set out to change anything," she said. "I just helped someone because it was the right thing to do. But what I learned is this: kindness isn't weakness, it's power. And sometimes it takes standing against the loudest voices to show what really matters." Henry watched from the front row, pride glowing in his weathered face. Denise wiped tears from her cheeks. And somewhere in the back, Mrs. Whitmore sat silently, her eyes downcast, her once powerful whispers drowned out by truth.
As the sun set that evening over Fairview, Aaliyah walked home with her family. The weight she once carried had shifted from shame to strength, from poverty to possibility. Her act of kindness had rippled outward, tearing through prejudice, exposing hypocrisy, and planting the seeds of change. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a badge. Sometimes it comes from the courage of a poor black girl who simply chose to help.